whereby we are going to go through a series of practice questions regarding the topic exception handling. I have prepared some around 6 questions on the same topic that we are going to go through to enhance our understanding on that topic. All right. Then if time allows, I also have some bonus questions in here that we had skipped in a previous session. All right. So we are going to start with the very first question here. Let me talk of question 1. All right. So let me see. So this question requires us to at least be able to understand division with exception handling, whereby we are required to create a program that takes 2 numbers from the user and performs a division operation. So in here, we should also implement exceptional handling to handle division by 0 and invalid inputs. All right. So in here, we are being tested on a number of concepts. One of them is exception handling. All right. Again, we have also seen how to go about mathematical operations, and we're also going to use the function approach method, whereby we are going to define a function. Then it's from this function that once we call the function, the rest of the operations will take place. All right. So just a quick overview of how to create a function. Remember, we use the keyword def for kind of definition. Then we give our function a name. All right. So in this case, we can just talk of division. All right. We want to do some divisions in here. All right. So in this case, we are not going to pass in any parameters in here. All right. So for now, we are going to first of all ignore the bit of exception handling and do it the way we used to do it before we handled this topic. All right. So in here, we need to get 2 inputs from the user. That is num1. All right. So from num1, we can talk of input. So in here, since we are talking about the division, we can have the numerator here. All right, num1 being the numerator. Then we can define num2. Then we can have input denominator. All right. So remember what we mentioned about inputs. Whenever you correct any input from the user, even if they enter a number, it will always come in as a string. So you should always convert this input to either a float or an integer. So in here, assuming that the user enters 10.5, all right? So that tells us that we should consider this as a float. Otherwise, if you convert, say, a float number to an integer, you will lose that the value that comes after the point. All right. I can just do a very quick demo of that so that at least we understand why we have to use the float here instead of integer. Have Python 3. All right. So we have x is equals to input. Let me just use integer for now. We want to have some input from the user. All right. Enter a number. So in case I have, say, 20.5 or rather 20.6, right? So basically, actually there is already an issue trying to convert this to an integer. But let me just first of all convert it to a float. 20.6. All right, x is 20.6. So if we talk of integer x, all right, so see, we are going to row some value out of it. All right, so whatever number that comes in here, we should convert that to a float so that we do not end up rowing the value of the user input. All right, so once we do that, we need the result. We can define, we can define any variable name. So in here we have the result, which is equals to num1 divided by num2. All right. Then after that, we can decide to print or return. Let me for now use the return statement, result. All right. Then again in here we can have the function. Let's call the function. All right. And again, because we talked of return here, we should print so that we are able to see the output on the console. All right. So this is kind of how we create a function. We talk of def, then we give our function a name. We have those parentheses and a colon. Then down here, you do the necessary operations, then finally call your function. All right. Let me execute my program down here. All right. So for the numerator, let me have 10. Denominator, let me have 2. All right. So that works. Again, if we talk about, let me talk of 29, the denominator 0. All right. So we get a zero division error. That is when we try to divide a number by 0. So that's where the concept of exception handling comes in. All right. And again, if for instance we execute the program, instead of entering the numerator as a number, I enter my name. All right. So again, we can't be able to convert that to a float. So we should be able to handle these errors. And this output, this is not the output that we wanted. So this basically means that our program has crashed. So instead of having our program crash, we should at least respond with a message trying to advise the user what to do. All right. So to consume exception handling, so in here we are going to handle the zero division error and the value errors. All right. So this is how to go about it. So for this part, we can talk about try. Let me first of all do away with this code here. I will copy and paste it back. Let me just comment it out here. So all right. So in here, let's talk about try. Then those operations will take place there. Then in here we expect to have the zero division error. So we can accept that. Let's talk about zero division error. All right. So we can decide to take it as E, or just leave it at that, so that we can define the message that will be returned to the user. So in here we can talk about print. Let's talk about error. We can't divide that by 0. Just a message that will be able to advise the user accordingly. All right. So the other kind of error that we need to take care of is a value error. All right. So the value error, we can also do a print here. Talk about error. So in here, we can just talk about invalid input. All right. So whatever operations we had here, we should now have them here. So let me have num1, num2. Then we can have the result being num1 divided by num2. All right. So in case we talk about return, all right, I think that's okay. But then, so that we are able to have everything uniform here, instead of return, let me call this result. Results is equals to that. Then print. Can print the results in there. All right. So let's now execute our program. So for the numerator, I have 10. Denominator 5. All right. Okay. So in a case that we talk about print, we do not need to print the function again, remember? And that's why we are getting none here as an output. So whenever you have print in here, then you do not need to print the function. So we print the function when we have the return statement here instead. All right. So let me execute it again. Denominator 10, or rather numerator 10, denominator 5. All right. Execute again. Have 10, have 0. Right. So look at what we get. We cannot divide that by 0 simply because we have been able to handle that error as it should be handled. All right. Then the other thing, let's try to have that. All right. So our program is not happy with our input and it's able to advise us accordingly. All right. So that is all was expected of us from this question. All right, so let's now move to the second question. Let's see what the second question has for us. All right, so number 2, this is a file handling with the exceptional. All right, so in here we are supposed to develop a script that reads a file and handles the file not found error exception by providing a user-friendly error. All right, so again, we are still going to make use of functions. So that just tells you that understanding how to go about creating a function, calling a function and all that, it's a very critical or a very key topic. All right. So in here, we want to create a function that will be used to read a file, the content of a file. All right. And in case that file doesn't exist, then our program should not crash, but should instead give us a friendly error like we have here. All right. So let's define our function here. We want to read a file. All right. We want to read a file. Okay. I need to do away with that. All right. Then in here, for this type of function, we can decide to pass a parameter in there. All right. Then the code to read the file should follow in here. All right. So in here, I will be mentioning something that we'll be covering in probably the next topic. All right. So Python is able to read the files on your machine and it's also able to write them. All right. So in here, we are going to do the try and except block. So for now, let me have pass. All right. Then I can have except. All right. So in this except block, remember, we said that whenever you are cautious about these errors, you should be aware of what error you may expect to get. All right. So when reading a file, we do not expect to find a zero division error. All right, or a value error. So most probably we expect to find a file not found error. All right. So in case so our program should try to read this file. And if that file does not exist, then we should print to the user and tell them that, hey, we can have error, file does not exist. All right. So again, in here, this is where we want to have our program locate and read the file. All right. So this is how we do it. We talk about with, we want to open. All right. Then we want to open a file by a specific name. All right. Since our function has taken in some parameter, so we should pass in the file name here. Okay. Then the mode in which we want to open this file, we have so many options here. We are going to review some of them, but for now, we just want to read that file. Okay. So once we read the file, we usually talk of with open, give the file, then mention the mode, then as file. All right. Have the full colon. Right. So the next line we can print file dot read. Okay. So this line should be able to read the file that we pass in our function. Okay, so let's now call our function read file. Okay, so in here I should pass in the name of the file. Okay, so in here we should pass in the name of the file that we want to read. Okay, so let me talk of non-existing file.txt. Let me try to do that. Of course, so in here we should mention the name of the file and probably the path in which that file can be found on our machine. Okay, so I have added a random name here of which this file doesn't exist. If we check on the current directory, this file does not exist. So let's see how our program behaves. Okay, so we are told that file does not exist. So we can make use of this particular file, notes.txt, which again exists in the current directory. So let me have that notes.txt. Let me execute that again. So see, we are able to read the content of our notes.txt file. Okay, so in case we were not working with the try and except block, of course we would have gotten, or rather our program would have crashed, as you have seen previously when we do not make use of the try and except block to handle those errors. All right, so the key items to get from what we have here from this solution is one, how to define a function and call the function. All right, then there is also the concept of exceptional handling. We are trying to open a file and read the content of that file, and of course if that file does not exist, we print user-friendly error. So the other concept is using Python to read files. All right, so we are going to see more information about how Python can be used to read and write files. Probably that should be the next topic that we are going to look at. All right, so that is all that was expected of you in this question here. Let's see what number 3 has for us. So this is a simple calculator that we need to create in here. All right, so in here we are supposed to kind of create a simple calculator that is able to handle errors. All right, so this calculator should be able to perform the basic arithmetics such as addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. So this calculator should also be able to handle zero division errors, invalid inputs, and any error that we may think about. We should be able to add that functionality. All right, let's start building our calculator. Okay, it should not be so complex. So in here we are going to work with a calculator that takes two inputs, that is maybe the first number and the second number. Okay, so we are going to create a function. Again, we have been working with functions, so I believe we are now confident that we can be able to create a function of whatever problem that you are given. So we define, let's call it calculator. Okay, so we are not going to pass in any data. All right, then in here let's have the try and except block. So for now, let's pass, then except. So for the purpose of division, so we have 4 operations that we are going to make use of. All right, so for the purpose of division, we can take care of the zero division error. So let's talk about zero division error, and then we can just print. We can call it error, then we can't divide by 0, right? So the other error that we expect we can get is when the user inputs a string. All right, so in this case we will talk of except. So this should be value error. Again, we print. Let's call it an error. We can talk about invalid input. All right. So the rest of the things should happen under this try block. Okay. So in here, this is where we get the input from the user. So let's talk about number one. All right. And we can have number two. So remember, we said that whatever inputs that comes from the user, we should convert that to either integer or float. But for the reason that we shared, we should have them as float. So I'll type in the two entries simultaneously. So we are going to have float, then input. All right. Then in here, we can talk about enter first number. All right. So in here, I can just talk about second number. All right. So once we get the two numbers, we should now get the operation from the user, because these two numbers, we can either do addition on them, multiplication, subtraction, or division. So instead of doing all of them at once, we should at least get this input from the user. So let's talk about operation. So in this, we can just talk about input. And in here, we request the user to select an operation. So this operation can either be addition, all right, can have subtraction, we can have multiplication, or division. All right. So the next thing, for instance, once we get the first, second, and the operation, we now need to do the arithmetic operation as selected by the user. All right. So we need to check if this operation is, say, plus, we need to add the two numbers. If it's minus, we need to find the difference between the two numbers and all that. So in here, we need to make use of the if statement. So we want to check if the operation is equals to a plus. All right. Then we need to print. We can have that formatting. Let's talk about the result. Then in here we can have num1 plus num2. Let me have some spaces in there. Okay. All right. Okay. Let me remove this. All right. So that's for addition. So again, this we should talk of elif. If the operation is equals to subtraction, then we should print something. All right. Again, in here we can just have a minus. All right. Then the next operation. So if the operation is equals to, so we can have that. Then we should have the result as num1 times num2. Okay. So the next operation, we have elif operation. We want to check if it's equals to the division. Then we should print the result as num1 divide by num2. So the user can decide to input something else other than the options that we have given here. So as it is, we can proceed and do a test, but since we are aware that the user can decide to, for the operation, they can decide to input a number, we also need to handle that. So we can simply talk about else, anything else apart from addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division, then we should advise them accordingly. So in this case, we can just tell them that that's an invalid input. All right. So this will happen in case the operation we receive anything else apart from what we have here. Then we are going to have this block in case we have num2 as 0, and this block we're going to have it in case num1 or num2 receive an entry that cannot be converted to a float. All right. So think of a string, a name, email, and all that. All right. So this is our calculator, and I think it's ready for testing. So once we define a function, it's now time to call the function. Remember, we said defining a function is one thing, and for you to get the output of that function, you need to call the function. Okay. So to call the function, you just need to call the name, and in case no parameters need to be passed in, just call the function as we have here. All right. So let me execute our program. Right. First number, I have 10. Second number, I have 30. All right. So the next thing is to select an operation. So for the operation, let me talk about plus. All right. So we get that the result is 40. All right. Let me do a test for some other operation. 21. Let me talk about division. All right. We get that. So I believe all these operations should work. So let me now move on to testing if it's able to handle the zero division error. So num1, let me have 20. Second, 0. All right. So for the operation, let me talk about division. Right. So we cannot divide by 0 simply because we have 20 divided by 0. Right. So the next thing is trying now to import something else. So for the first number, let me talk about high, and it will quickly exit that by giving us this message. All right. So that is it for this calculator. So again, we have seen how to create a function. All right. Then exception handling, where we have been able to handle zero division error and value error. Then we have also seen how to get the input from the user, convert it to float, and capture the operation. All right. So that's a simple calculator that we have created. All right. So something else, custom exception for a project. Right. So let's see what this one has for us. So this is question number 4. Question number 4. So a custom exception for a project. So we should create a custom exception class for a specific application or project. Then write a program that traces and handles that exception. All right. So I think we had created a similar one from our last session, and let us see how to approach this kind of problem. All right. So without complicating it like we did last time, so I'll just have a class, right? Then this class, I will give it a name. So even before I start typing, I want us to create the same thing that we had created last time, like some kind of an ATM or a system that will help us withdraw some money. All right. So remember, for you to withdraw, you need to have some balance. All right. And whatever amount you want to withdraw, it should be equal or less than the balance. Okay. So at no one time should this system allow you to withdraw more than you have in your account. Okay. So that is kind of a program that I want us to create. And this question requires us to create a custom exception, right? So let's start with that. So we can call it. So we want this kind of exception to be raised in case a user tries to withdraw more than they have in their balance. Okay, so in this case, we can call it insufficient balance. Right? Let me just use this kind of naming convention here. Right? So again, in here we can have exception. Okay, and instead of the very many lines that we passed in below here, we can just simply have pass. All right. Then the next thing is now defining a function that we are going to use to withdraw funds from our account. Okay, so we have defined, we will call it withdraw. All right, so this function should take into two parameters. All right, so one of them is the balance. Okay, the balance of your account. The next one is the amount to withdraw. All right, so we want to have it in a way that whenever the amount exceeds the balance, we should be able to raise that error. Okay, so in here, let's make use of the try. For now, let me have pass except broke. So in here, for now, we can accept insufficient balance. Right? Okay, so let me have print, and I can simply print let me print insufficient balance. All right, then up here under the try block, we proceed and do the necessary arithmetics. So in here we should now define what happens when this user tries to withdraw some funds. Right, so we want to check if the amount is greater than the balance. Okay, so what should we do? We should raise something. We should raise this exception here. We should raise that insufficient balance error, and in here we can pass in the error that we want to pass into the user. All right. So in case this happens, then raise an insufficient balance error. Else we can proceed and perform the withdraw. So if the withdraw happens, then we need to see what remains after the withdrawal has happened. So we have balance will be equals to, the balance that was there before, right, minus the amount. Okay, but remember what we said. In case you want to see what remains, or the shorthand method of this, we can simply have balance, we can have minus equals amount. All right, so that's the shorthand of that. Then in here we can proceed to notify the user that the withdrawal has happened and this is your balance. All right, so we can have print. Then let me format this. Withdraw successful. All right, balance. Then we pass in the balance here. So basically this is the balance that remains after this user has withdrawn the funds. All right, so it's now time to test our simple program here. All right, so we can do not warning but withdraw. We have withdraw there, and again, so we want to call this function, and our function requires us to pass some two parameters. So for the balance, we can talk of a header 1000 bob, and the amount to withdraw, I want to withdraw 400. All right, so let's test our program. All right, so it was successful. Balance 600. All right, so what if I try withdrawing 4,000, yet my balance is 1,000? Let's see. All right, so we see insufficient balance. All right, then what else? What else can we test? I mean, those are the only elements that we required to test. All right. So we have created a custom class, a custom exception class by just using the two lines. Then we went ahead to define a function that is supposed to be used to withdraw funds from an account. And for the logic of this application, we are not supposed to withdraw any amounts. We are not supposed to withdraw amounts more than the balance. All right. So that's the simple logic that we can use. So let's move on to the next question. So we have uh, logging for debugging. Let's see what this one has for us. So we should modify the calculator that we created to use the logging module for debugging. Log all operations and errors to a file. All right, we are supposed to make use of this calculator here. We have already seen how our calculator works, so we want now to record the events of this calculator. So one of the events that we need to record is whatever happens in here. So let me show you. Let me show you how we need to modify this calculator. So for the operations, instead of having what we have here, we can assign this to result. Okay. So let me just copy and paste this on each of these operations, then I'll adjust accordingly. So this is supposed to be minus. This is supposed to be multiplication. And again, this is supposed to be division. All right. Then, so we are going to record this event on our on the log file that we are going to define. So in here, once we print that, we can come in here and talk about logging dot warning. All right. Then whatever we can just talk of invalid input, no harm. All right. So this will print on our console. All right. Then the next thing that they should do by this using this line is by adding this event to the log file. All right. And we are going to define a line here that will take care of that. All right. So that is one of the section where we need to add those events. All right. Then in here we can define. You see, we have already assigned the result to whatever operation that takes place in here. Then in here, we can now do a line that will record whichever operation that takes place. All right. So this is how to do it. So we can have logging dot. So we can talk about this being info. Then let me concatenate those strings. So the operation. So in here, let me talk about num1, then operation. So it's either that is num1. It can be plus, minus, division, or multiplication. Then we pass in num2. All right. Then is equals to the result. All right. Once we do this, let me see previously if we had, okay, all right. So we can simply then print results, use pass in the results that way. And of course, we have to use that F. So this should be result. All right. So once we do that, we also need to record these events in here. So we can have logging dot. So these are errors. Let me record it as an error. So let me talk about zero division error. All right. We can also have a similar line here talking about logging dot. Let's call that error as well. Then we can have invalid input. All right. So those are the few lines that we were required to add on our calculator. Then there is a line that we need to define here that will now enable our calculator to record those happenings on a log file. All right. So in here, after importing logging module here, I'll just come in here and talk about logging. So basically what we are doing is configuring what this logging module should do. Okay, so we should talk about logging dot basic config. Then in here we can pass in the configuration that should be followed. All right, we are basically defining how our program should write the logs of the happenings of this program. So in here, as the question requires us to do, we want to log the events of this calculator on a file. So in here we need to pass in the file name, okay, and we can call it, let's call it calc.log. All right. Then for the revo, let's call it log.info. Of course, we have quite a number of revos that we can make use of, but for now, let's make use of info. Then let's format that. So we are basically formatting the way the time is supposed to appear. Remember, for any log information to be useful, it needs to capture the time, all right, so that you can know when that event occurred. It may not make a lot of sense, say, in a calculator like this, but say whatever happens, especially on servers, you need to take note of that and when it happened, so that in case it is an error or a modification that was done by somebody, you can also try tracking who was logged in during that time. All right. So in this case, let's define how the time should appear. So that should be ESC time. So in here, this is how to go about it. An S in there. Then let's have that. Again, we need to define the revo name. So this revo name kinds of talks of it. Is it information? Is it a warning? Or the different levels that happens or that can happen in here. Remember, when we are talking about let me see if I added that. All right. So for instance, look at what we have here. So this is an error. We have info. So those are the levels that we are talking about in this section here. All right. So this should be level name. Again, should pass in an S. Right. So these shouldn't be here. It should be here. Then the next thing that we need to capture is the message. The fact that we have captured the time, then is it information? Is it an error? Then the next thing should be the information or the message, right? The message that we want to log. So this simply should be a message, then we have an S in there. And I believe this should work as expected. All right, so let's see here. Let's see here. All right, so let me execute this program. And okay, for now we have calculator.log. Let me first of all remove that file. All right, so we don't have calculator.log. So let's pay attention to what we have here. We should see a new file being created. Execute this program. Enter the first number. Actually, if you are so keen, a new file has been created here. Then the first number should be, let me talk of 20, second one 50, and the operation should be multiplication. All right, so something happened. So let's see. We have an error here. So we have 20, 50. We wanted to do some multiplication. All right, so let me first of all correct this. So this should be level name. All right. So that's one of the errors I identified from the output here. All right, let me execute it again and see what happens. Have 20, 30. The operation is multiplication. All right, so I believe that was where the error was coming in. So that is 600, right? So the happenings of the events of this program, let's try to view what we have. All right, so we see that that has been lodged. Then in here we can come talk about 12. We have 10. Have subtraction. All right, so something else has been lodged. If you do that, we have 11, we have 12. Let's see, make use of that operation. All right, so see, one, we have the time being logged. All right, then in here we see the information being logged. Then the next thing is the message. So basically the message that we have is the operation. So this is the message that is being passed in here. Let me show you here. So in here we have, this is what we have: operation. Then this is num1 here. Then whatever operation that we entered happens here, and num2 is equals to now whatever we are supposed to get in there. So let's try to have some zero somewhere, some zero division error. All right, so see what we have. It's an error, zero division error. So this happens under this block. So we talked of logging dot error, and that's why we get this error here. And of course, this is the message that we asked our program to return. All right, so that is what was expected of us in this question. All right, so number 6 requires us to write a program that handles both, or rather that handles multiple exceptions, e.g. value error, type error, division error. So basically we have already seen such an example, but let's see how to approach this. Maybe not necessarily using what we have already done, but might not be so different. So if we can think of the same example of trying to divide two numbers, all right? So we can get zero division error when we try to divide a number by 0, and we can also get the value error in case maybe the input or the numbers that we are working with, one of them or both of them are not actually numbers. All right, so let's do this. Let's define a function. let's call it division, right? So let's still work with division. All right. Then let's not pass in any parameters. We are going to get these from the user. So let's try to do something. We pass that for now. Then we accept. So as I mentioned, let's try to accept zero division error. All right. So we can print error can't divide by 0. All right. So the other kind of error we can think of is the value error. All right, the value error. So for the value error, we can simply print something here. Let's talk about error, then talk about invalid inputs. And again, in case you have any other errors that you expect might happen, you can just have them down here. All right. Then another thing. Let me see. All right, let's see if we will come back here to have any other adjustments. So in here, let's have num1. Then we can have float. Let's have input. Let me have num2. All right. So then let's have, we can just print. Let me just print num1 divided by num2. All right. Then down here, we can simply call the function. So by calling the function, it will try, we have some input from the user, and it will try to divide the two numbers. In case that is a success, it will proceed to print. In case it's not a success, then it will check on which category of errors it falls on. All right, so let's see. Let's see how that goes. So enter a number. We have 2, 2. All right. Again, we have 2, 0. Okay. Let's try again. We have high, and that goes to the invalid input. All right. So in case we can also try, let me try something here. Let me try converting this to an integer. Let me try converting that to an integer. That's 2, 5. Okay. Let me have something like 2.5. All right. Invalid inputs and all that. So this is what was expected of us in that question. Let us just try to play around with this question here. So instead of having to define the third block here, how about if I comment this one out and instead have what we have here? So let me have value error. All right. So what happens? Let me see. So this doesn't seem to value error. So this should be capital V. All right. So let's see how this one goes. Enter a number. Talk about high. Can't divide by 0. Of course, this response is generic and should take care of the two errors that we have here. So that's a high. So let me try to have 12 divided by 0. All right. So instead of having can't divide by 0, we can talk of an error occurred. Such a generic kind of a response. All right. So you can just play around with what we have here to, because for instance, if these blocks were so many, I mean, you expected to get, say, 10 errors. Instead of having all those lines, you can just generalize all the errors that you expect and have them under one block. All right. And of course, you see, whatever error that you give, it might not directly point out to the exact the exact type of error, but it will at least be able to advise the user that something happened. All right, so please look your inputs and all that. So that's also an approach that we can give to that question. That is it for exceptional handling. We have at least been able to work on some 6 use cases, and I believe those are enough. All right. So as a bonus, we have some bonus questions in here that we are going to look at. They are just 3 of them, and they will help us do some revision. All right. So let's have a look at these 3 questions. So in here, we are required to write a Python program to display the first and last colors from a list. All right. So we have a question here. So basically, these questions are not related to exception handling. As I mentioned, these are just general questions. All right, so they will help us in doing some revisions in here. So we should have a Python program to display the first and last colors from the list. All right, so this is on the concept of working with list. All right, so whether we have colors or numbers, the concept will remain the same. So this is the approach. So the simple program, we can just print color list. All right. So to print or to display the first color, we just need to have color list. Then we do that. So this is basically called list slicing. All right. So this will give us the first color. And in case you want to get the last color from the list, you just have to print that and use -1 instead. So for indexing in list starts from 0. I hope you remember this. 1 all the way to n, where n is the end index. All right. So n here does not represent the number of entries in here, because as you see, indexing starts from 0. All right. Then in case you want to start from the very last end here, you can start from -1, -2, all the way to the very last or the first element here. So for the purpose of this question, we need to print or to display the first color. That's how to get hold of the first color, index 0, and the last color. All right, that should be -1. So these are just the 2 lines that are required for this case. So in case we try to execute this, right, get red and black. That shouldn't be so hard. So the next question should also ignore the numbering. We see we started from number 6, but it's because from a previous session we did up to number 5 and we left 6, 7, and 8. So in here we should write a Python program to test whether a number is within 100 or 1,000. All right, so we have a range here. So in here, this program, we first of all need to define the range. Let me call it num range for number range. Then we have the range. So in here we can have 100, and we can have, is it 1,001? So this program should test whether a number is within this range. All right. So let us put this question this way so that we can have a clear definition of what we want to do. So we should test if a number is 100 or 1,000 and any number in between them. All right. So in this case, or in our own definition, both 100 and 1,000 should be included. So in case whatever program that we come up with, if we check 100, it should tell us that it is within this range. All right. So that's one of the use cases. Alternatively, we can harden that the script or the program so that it does not consider 100 and 1,000 as numbers within the given range. So in case both 100 and 1,000 are inclusive, then this last number should be 1,001. All right. Hope we remember how we got here. So let me just do a quick demo so that we can appreciate what that means. So in case we want to do a range between 100 and 1,000, whereby both of these are included. Okay, so we are turning between having 1,001 here and 1,000. So let's see what 1,000 has for us. So I should convert this to a list, this range. All right. Then from this list, remember, we can be able to fetch the very last element when the range is 100 and 1,001. So if we have that, we get that the last element is 1,000. So if we adjust this to be 1,000, so the last element in that range will be 999. So in that case, we have to keep 1,001. All right. So again, we want to have a program that we will give it a number and it should tell us if that number is in between this range here. All right. So we can come up with a function. We can come up with a function, number check. All right. So it will take in a number and it will tell us. So if number in num range. All right. Then we should print something. Let me have that. Num in the given range. All right. Then you can have else print. Okay, let me just make it simple. Number not in the given range. All right. So the next thing is to call our function. So num check. So we should call our function and pass in a number. So we want to check if this number is within this range. So we can do that. Call the function and execute our program. So 190 is in the given range, right? Which again is true. So if we have 90, 90, so that number is not in the given range. How about 900? Execute the program again. The number is in the given range. 9,000, number not in the given range. So that's the approach that we can give to this problem. So again, as part of your personal development, your personal revision, try to exclude 100 and 1,000 from this range. I mean, if you check, say, let me show you what I mean. So just try to have, in case we have 100, do the check. It tells us that it is in the given range. Again, if you also test 1,000, it will tell us that it's in the given range. So just harden the program here so that both 100 and 1,000 I'll consider not to be in the given range. All right. So in case you get stuck, just reach out. All right. And finally, we have number 8 here. So number 8, we should write a program, Python program to count the number of 4s in a given list. All right. So we can have X, which happens to be our list of numbers. Then we can have 2, 5, 6, 8. Let me have 4. Let me have one entry of 4. All right. So this is a list that we have defined. The question has not given us a list, so we should be able to count the number of 4s in this list. Okay, so in case count 4, let me have that, right? So we have defined a variable whereby it's supposed to give us the count of 4, and I have assigned it to assigned it to 0, right? So I want to do a Python program that will count the number of 4 in here. So I can have for I in X. All right. Remember, I can't be able to print I. Let's see. Hope we remember how to do the for loops, right? So we can print them. So in here, I want to check if I is equals to 4. I want to increase the count of 4 by 1. So look, what happens in here is that it will go in a loop. It will first of all have to, right? If that is not equals to 4, it will continue. All right. So in case it comes to this 4, it will identify that 4 satisfies this condition. Then it will add 1 to count of 4. All right. So let's see how that goes. So if I is equals to 4, then we should talk about count of 4 plus equals 1. Remember what we said? We can have count of 4 is equals to count 4 plus 1. So again, we said that the shorthand method to that is that. Then I believe that's enough. That program should be complete. Then in here we can come in and print count of 4. All right. So let's execute this. So we see that we have one occurrence of 4. So in case I add 4 here, execute our program again, we have 2. Then let me have several entries here. So at least I think we have some 5 entries. All right. So again, there are 5. So that's my approach. Maybe there could be several other ways to approach that problem, but that's the approach I have given it. And I believe that's all for today. Unless anyone has a question,